What happens when a wounded bear is ambushed by a deadly predator, only to be saved by something that shouldn't even exist in those woods? What happened next stunned millions, and it's still going viral for a reason. You ever meet someone who just wants to be left alone, but the world just won't let them? That was Kirby. Kirby wasn't some majestic magazine cover bear. He was stocky, lopsided, with one ear flopped down like it gave up years ago. But what he lacked in symmetry, he made up for in something you do not see much of these days: patience. Folks in Montville joked that Kirby was retired. They'd spot him waddling along the stream bank like an old man looking for a shady bench and a sandwich. He never got into trash cans, never chased campers, didn't even blink at noisy kids tossing rocks his way last summer. He just watched, calm, quiet, like he'd seen worse, and honestly, he had. You see, Kirby never had a mother. Locals say someone found him when he was barely bigger than a house cat, limping down Route 214 with half his side clawed open and eyes swollen shut. No one knows exactly what happened, but the scars on his ribs told the story louder than words. So, no, Kirby wasn't out here living his best life. He was surviving it, with grace and maybe a little sarcasm. That morning, heat had sucker-punched the valley early. The air smelled like wet bark and tired pine. Kirby took his usual path along Willow Creek, the only place left that hadn't been flattened by hiking trails or drone-happy influencers. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for water. Not that bottled stuff either, just something cool enough to slap on his dry tongue and call it a day. And that's when it started. He was leaning over the creek, paw swiping at algae, ready to scoop a drink. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. Then, shh. Not the kind of sound that says, wind's picking up. No. This was deeper, slower, heavier, like wet rope sliding across bone. Kirby froze, that survival instinct talking. He didn't flinch, he didn't run. He just turned his head, real slow, and saw it. A python. Not a garden snake, not some spaghetti noodle with attitude. This thing was thick enough to flatten a raccoon without blinking. It moved like a storm cloud, silent, wide, and absolutely uninterested in friendship. Kirby backed up, too late. The snake struck like a coiled spring, snagging his back leg with a speed that didn't match its size. Kirby bellowed, swung his paw, tried to twist, but the python was already wrapping, coiling, locking him down like he owed it money and it came to collect. Down he went, slammed onto the dirt, ribs grinding against rock, vision turning sideways. He fought. Oh, he fought hard. But every time he rolled, that snake cinched tighter, crushing muscle, pushing air out of his lungs like a vacuum pump. His claws scraped the ground, dug into nothing. He snapped his jaws, but all he caught was dust. And the worst part? There was no noise, no backup, no one watching, no justice, no nature documentary crew hiding in the bushes ready to intervene. Just a bear, doing nothing wrong, being choked out by a problem that didn't belong here to begin with. And for a moment, just a brief, hollow moment, Kirby stopped fighting. Not because he gave up, but because he knew the forest. He knew when no one was coming. But then, crack, not from his bones, not this time. Something hit the ground hard behind him. Something else had entered the mess. The pressure around his ribs loosened. The snake twitched, and suddenly it was off him, dragged sideways like someone had yanked a carpet out from under a couch. Kirby tried to lift his head, but everything spun. He could only hear it, a heavy thud, then another, wet smacks, a grunt. The python's body thrashed once, twice, then went still. Silence, then breath, his own, rough, ragged, but still going. Whoever or whatever had stepped in, they were gone as fast as they came. But make no mistake, Kirby had been saved, and it wasn't by luck. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this story unfolds and who shows up next. Let me be clear. Kirby didn't walk away from that snake attack with a victory lap. He didn't pose for selfies or get airlifted to some animal spa. He lay there for a solid hour, coughing like an old engine and blinking mud out of his eyes. Every breath he took sounded like a screen door flapping in the wind. His ribs felt like somebody had shoved a truck tire around his chest and said, "Let's squeeze till we hear a pop." But he was alive, and considering what had just happened, that was worth a small miracle. He didn't even know what had saved him. Just that something had, and whatever it was, it came in swinging like a thunderstorm with fists. As the sun climbed higher, Kirby dragged himself toward a shady grove up the slope. No ceremony, no drama, just stubborn steps and grunts. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to breathe. Now, here's where things got strange. The forest had gone still, and I mean church on a Tuesday still. No birds, no squirrels, not even a fly daring to buzz. Kirby leaned against a tree and tried to catch his breath, but then he felt it. That feeling. When you know you're being watched. And not by something small either. He turned his head. Slow. The trees looked normal until one of them moved. Correction. Something in the trees moved. It was high up, almost at the canopy line, but it wasn't a bird, and it sure wasn't another snake. No scales, no hiss, just limbs. Big, muscular, purposeful limbs. Kirby squinted. It was a figure, not a man, not a bear, but tall, broad-shouldered, and furry. And it wasn't hiding. In fact, it was staring straight at him. Now, you gotta understand, Kirby wasn't some rookie out here. He'd seen moose stampedes, lightning storms, and even one guy trying to grill bacon next to an open beehive. Nothing fazed him anymore. But this gave him pause. The figure dropped down, not all the way to the ground, but close enough for Kirby to make out its shape. It was a gorilla. Yeah, you read that right. A big one. Silver-backed, thick as an oak trunk, and built like it bench-pressed tree trunks for fun. But here's the kicker. This thing wasn't local, not even close. Gorillas don't do Montville. They don't belong in the Pacific Northwest. And yet, here it was. Calm. Still. Like it had been waiting. Kirby locked eyes with it, and what did the gorilla do? It nodded. Not a twitch, not a fluke. A deliberate, slow nod. The kind a man gives another man when words don't cut it, as if to say, "You're good. I got you." Kirby blinked, tried to rise, but his legs wobbled like wet noodles. The gorilla stayed still, watching, not helping, not approaching, just watching, like it was guarding something. And then came the sound that made Kirby's fur bristle again. Footsteps, not light ones either. Heavy, purposeful, human. Voices followed. Two men arguing, loud, careless. They weren't hikers. They weren't rangers. One of them said, "I told you it went that way. There's blood all over the rocks." Kirby didn't know what they were looking for. He just knew it wasn't good. He tried to move deeper into the trees, but a branch snapped beneath him. One of the men turned fast. "Over there!" Kirby froze. The gorilla didn't. It vanished. Just gone. 1 second it was there, the next it melted into the brush like smoke through fingers. The men got closer. Kirby couldn't run. He couldn't even growl. And that's when everything shifted again. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for. It's right here. Stay with it and see how this bear flips the script. Let's talk about timing. Kirby had the kind of luck that made you question if the universe had a personal grudge. 1 minute you're sipping creek water, minding your furry business. The next, ambushed by a python, nearly crushed to death, and now being tracked by 2 men with attitudes louder than their footsteps. He couldn't move fast. Honestly, he could barely move at all. His leg throbbed. His lungs still hadn't forgiven him for not dying during the snake chokehold. He was lying low in a patch of ferns, barely camouflaged, while the 2 men circled nearby like buzzards wearing boots. "Tracks are fresh," one grunted, poking the mud with a stick like he knew what he was doing. "You sure it was a bear?" "Dude," the other snorted. "What else bleeds like that and drags itself uphill?" We're not tracking a deer in stilettos. Kirby closed his eyes. Great. Not only was he injured, he was the punchline of some hunting podcast waiting to happen. But then, just when he expected to hear the cock of a rifle or the click of a camera, he heard something else. A low, slow rustle. Not the panicked kind, the intentional kind. Heavy feet pressing into soft ground, from behind the men. Now look, Kirby didn't see it. He didn't need to. But the silence that followed told him plenty. The men stopped talking. "Do you hear that?" one whispered. The other didn't answer. Then, snap. A branch broke. Closer, heavier. And then something happened that should have gone in a textbook under life coming at you fast. A shadow moved, big, powerful, silent as smoke but solid as stone. The gorilla stepped out. Yeah, him again. But this time, no tree cover, no distance, just 20 feet of grass between a mountain of muscle and two grown men who suddenly looked like they were regretting all their choices. "What the?" one managed. The other dropped his phone, literally. It hit the ground and, bless technology, it kept recording. The gorilla didn't roar. He didn't charge. He stood there, still, staring. Like a security guard who just caught someone trying to sneak into the VIP section with a fake badge. Then, he took one step forward. That was all it took. The men ran, not a casual jog, not a manly retreat. They sprinted like their pants were on fire and judgment was 5 seconds behind. And here's the part that made it all go viral. That phone. The one they dropped? Still recording. Still aimed. Still catching every glorious second of two grown men being stared down by a silent, stone-faced gorilla who clearly had no time for their nonsense. The clip hit the internet in less than 24 hours. No captions needed. Just a shaky shot of Kirby crawling away while the gorilla stared down two mystery men and watched them disappear like they owed him money. People online lost it. Some thought it was a prank. Others swore it was CGI. Wildlife forums exploded. "Montville gorilla?" trended on multiple platforms. A retired ranger commented, "I've seen moose do weird stuff, but this beats all." But Kirby? He didn't care. He found shelter in a ravine later that evening, curled up in leaves, ribs aching, legs stiff. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Something had stepped in. Not to be a hero, not to take credit, but to say, in the most direct way possible, you don't mess with those who mind their own business. And maybe, just maybe, Kirby thought, not all monsters come to hurt. Some come to interrupt the ones that do.